The air was heavy with silence when it happened. Cameras were flashing, reporters were ready, and Senator John Kennedy extended his hand toward a young Marine who had just returned from deployment. But to the shock of everyone in the room, the Marine didn't move. His eyes, tired yet blazing with something unspoken, stared at the senator's outstretched hand. Then, with a slight shake of his head, he refused. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Marine's chest rose and fell sharply, his uniform pressed but worn, his jaw tight as if holding back more than words. John Kennedy, known for his humor and quick wit, didn't smile. He didn't withdraw his hand immediately either. Instead, he looked at the young man with a softness no one expected from a politician standing in the spotlight. The Marine's name was Corporal James "Jimmy" Walker. Only 24, he had already lived through battles that most people couldn't even imagine. He had been stationed overseas, losing not just friends but pieces of himself that no medal or parade could restore. His right hand trembled slightly, not from nerves but from injury. A shrapnel had torn through his arm months ago. Though he'd undergone surgery, the doctors told him he might never regain full strength. To Jimmy, shaking a senator's hand wasn't just a gesture, it was an expectation he could no longer meet without shame. And that was why he refused. The room buzzed with whispers. Some reporters scribbled notes furiously, while others prepared for a scandalous headline: "Marine rejects Senator's handshake." But Kennedy didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly lowered his hand and stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Son," Kennedy said softly, audible enough for the front row but not the cameras, "you don't have to shake my hand, but I owe you mine." Confused, Jimmy blinked. Kennedy didn't stop there. In front of everyone, the senator bent slightly, not out of political showmanship but out of genuine respect, and placed his hand gently over Jimmy's injured arm. "You carried this country on your shoulders when it needed you. Don't you ever think you owe me or any of us something as small as a handshake. It's us who owe you." The crowd fell silent. Even the clicking of cameras stopped for a beat. Kennedy then motioned for Jimmy's mother, who stood in the audience clutching a folded flag she had received one another so Jimmy's older brother hadn't made it back. Kennedy asked her to come forward, and she did, her eyes already welling with tears. "Ma'am," Kennedy said, his voice breaking just slightly, "your family has given more to this country than words could repay. You don't just deserve our thanks, you deserve our promise that your sacrifice will never be forgotten." Jimmy's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for months. He felt the weight of survivor's guilt, the haunting memories of his brother's last breath, the pain of an arm that would never work the same way again. He thought refusing the handshake was a way of staying invisible, a way of protecting himself from pity. But Kennedy wasn't giving him pity, he was giving him honor. What happened next stunned the room. Instead of forcing a handshake, Kennedy pulled Jimmy into an embrace. The Marine resisted at first, rigid, uncomfortable with the display, but then his shoulders slumped, and the walls he had built around himself cracked. The hug wasn't political. It wasn't rehearsed. It was human. The cameras began clicking again, but this time the story wasn't about scandal. It was about a Marine who had given everything, and a leader who chose to see the man, not just the uniform. Later that night, Jimmy sat alone, replaying the moment in his mind. For the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel broken. He felt seen. Kennedy had reminded him of something his brother used to say before every deployment: "Strength isn't in the hand you give, it's in the heart you carry." Weeks later, Jimmy found himself visiting schools, sharing his story with kids who looked up at him with wide eyes. He didn't talk about the battles, the pain, or the nightmares. He talked about resilience, about how sometimes strength meant admitting you couldn't do everything, and about how healing came when you allowed others to stand beside you. And every time he finished, he would smile faintly and say, "A handshake doesn't make you strong, but compassion does." The moment that began with a refusal turned into a lesson the entire nation could hold on to, that true respect isn't in empty gestures, but in the courage to see each other's humanity. And for Jimmy Walker, that single day changed everything. He walked away not as the Marine who refused a handshake, but as the man who reminded the world that even the strongest heroes sometimes just need someone to hold them up. By the end, No one remembered the refusal. They remembered the embrace, and that, more than anything, broke Kia and healed every heart in the room.